In the late 1800s to early 1900s, there was a man, a mad monk, a spiritual healer. Truth and myth blend together in his story as it's recorded in the history books. They say he was born in the village of Pokrovsky along the Tura River. But from humble beginnings, Grigori Rasputin rose to become a monk, healer, and influencer. He worked his way into the inner circle of Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra, caring for their hemophilic child Alexei through, allegedly, the healing power of prayer. Word was, it worked. Was he a holy man? A mystic? A psychic? Rasputin went on to become an infamous figure throughout Russia, as the people began to fear his influence over the Tsars. So, a plot arose to assassinate him. Yet, again, allegedly, the mad monk survived multiple attempts. Stab wounds, poison, gunfire. The memoirs claim each time he fell, he would rise back up. Only when he was shot thrice and thrown into the icy water did the man finally succumb. Death by drowning. In a river, not unlike which he grew up by. His body was found under the ice in the Malaya Nevka 2 days later. Such was the fate of Grigori Rasputin. Or, that's how the story goes, anyway. A few years ago, one of my first ever videos on this channel covered the original Psychonauts, or more specifically, the links between its main character Raz and history's infamous Razputin. It's an older piece from when I was still figuring out my style, but I am still proud of the video's thesis and stand by it.
I can't swim.
I felt even prouder when the sequel came out and I finally rolled credits on Psychonauts 2. Psychonauts 2 vindicated my ideas about the first game while also surprising me, enriching those ideas in ways I could never have predicted. And I've been burning to talk about it ever since, so yeah. This is a sequel to that video, about the sequel to that video game. Don't worry, I'll recap my 2021 video without fluff. Spoilers follow for both Psychonauts and Psychonauts 2. Here's the gist of that first video. Lots of video game protagonists can't swim. As reported by Stephen Totio back in 2009, this is usually because it's hard to make swimming fun or mechanically interesting. But also, large water bodies provide a perfect excuse to cut off the map. Players typically understand that water at the edge of the map is shorthand for inaccessible horizons, so turn back? Double Fine Productions used this constraint for 2005's Psychonauts, as so many games of the period did, but they added an extra layer by making your inability to swim a critical part of the story. Every member of Razputin Aquato's family was cursed to one day die in water. It was rare for a game to actually explain this choice, let alone fold it into its themes, yet here it was. Death by drowning was an eventuality for all Aquatos, and so Raz internalized it as a deep-seated fear and never learned to swim. In-game, he wouldn't drown when he touched water, he'd be pulled below the surface by a psychic hand manifesting as the curse, manifesting as his aquaphobia. Zooming out a bit, Psychonauts is a game about psychics in training at Whispering Rock Summer Camp. The levels were different characters' psyches, which you enter with your powers. And every mindscape is radically different. Every person is. Their hopes, their quirks, their fears, all manifest in unique level design. One of the questions the development team posed to each other was, what color is the sky in your world? And that diversity of responses is what Psychonauts delivered best. A collection of bizarre but layered mindscapes, with skies painted a spectrum of human experiences. Raz's fear of water lives in his brain, and that manifests in literal fashion in the level design. A climactic moment in his mindscape, the final level, revolves around frantically climbing a circus set while the water level rises below him.
You have a water phobia? Me too!
Huh? No. Well, yes. My family has this problem with water.
Professional psychonauts are one part secret agent, one part psychiatrist. Their job is to help people by navigating their complex psyches, and maybe discover intel along the way. In real life, Grigori Rasputin wasn't a psychic, but he was a self-professed mystic and healer, working closely with the Tsars. It's said he grew close to them, helping their sick son, Alexei, but his quote-unquote powers also drew suspicion among the public. People hated how much influence he held over the Tsars. Eventually, a plot arose to assassinate him. The stories claim Rasputin survived multiple attempts. One legend, popularized by one of the killers, Prince Felix Yusupov himself, said he survived poison first, and then a gunshot, and it wasn't until he was drowned that Rasputin finally died. Publishing in 2016, the Smithsonian magazine tells it differently. In reality, his death was probably more mundane. The autopsy revealed he'd been shot at close range, and it made no mention of poison or drowning. Yusupov likely dramatized the story to make himself look better and to sell books. But the myth does matter. It's a well-known version of the story, and the version endlessly dramatized and remixed in popular culture.
Careful little swim under the ice.
His body was found in the water, after all. Historical dramas and docuseries like Netflix's The Last Tsars, or 1996's Razputin, Dark Servant of Destiny play this straight, adapting historical records in tandem with Yusupov's writings. More fictionalized works, meanwhile, lean into the absurdity of the story. In both 1997's Anastasia and 2021's The King's Man, Rasputin's death in the water is shown, but ends up as yet another fake-out. The Mad Monk rises again. The man has died, but there is a mysticism about him that remains. It doesn't seem like a coincidence that Psychonauts' Raz was also cursed to die one day in water, or that the biggest moments in his arc had to do with him confronting that fear and crossing some body of water. Partway through the first game, he had to cross Lake Oblongata when all his friends and teachers were endangered, with the lake acting as a threshold between the warmth and safety of camp and the cold discomfort of Thorny Tower's asylum. In the first game, Raz and his friends weren't the titular Psychonauts. Not yet anyway. They were in training for it. But it was here at Thorny Towers he was challenged to put everything he'd learned to use on the island's institutionalized population. This all culminates with the final level in his own mind, where his greatest phobia quite literally bubbles to the surface. To overcome it, Raz has to fight a mental manifestation of his father with the help of his actual father. He has to reconcile with the life and family he ran away from, and all the baggage that comes with it. The aquaphobia is part of that. He doesn't quite overcome his fear by the game's end, but he does face it. Multiple times, in fact. For now, that's enough. Psychonauts 2 sees Raz now an intern working directly for the Psychonauts, and it's here our troubles begin. In the opening level, we learn about a mysterious threat, the game's apparent antagonist, Maligula, a powerful psychic with hydrokinetic abilities. Apparently, she could wield water serpents. Raz and his girlfriend Lily share a look of concern, and it's all too clear to the player what that concern is.
Still got that water phobia, huh?
It's not a phobia, it's a curse.
We also meet Raz's family in Psychonauts 2. We've met his dad before, but the game introduces his mom, siblings, and grandmother Nana to the mix too. All here to embarrass him at his new workplace in classic nuclear family fashion. They're a band of traveling circus performers. One of the funniest ironies of the first game's premise was that Raz ran away from the circus to join the Psychonauts. Fun fact, Maria Rasputin, Grigori's apparent daughter, fled Russia and became a circus performer after her father died, primarily as a tamer of lions. There's another cool tangent with real history there for ya. She'd often use her namesake as part of her billing, the daughter of the Mad Monk, turned lion tamer. As you spend time with Raz's family, it becomes increasingly clear that all the Aquato line is just as haunted by the curse as he is. Each time you talk to Nana, she'll leave you with this little nugget.
Stay away from the water!
And yeah, the curse is still important. But see, in the first Psychonauts, Raz just had that small but specific point of comparison with the real Grigori Rasputin. In Psychonauts 2, we learned that Maligula was a former Psychonaut who used to work with the Tsars and helped their son. The Krulovian public, in the game's analog of Russia, came to resent her influence over them. Director Tim Schafer has talked about how excited he was about her name, Malignant Caligula. Maligula. But even though she's named after Caligula, her story has more direct and explicit parallels with Grigori Rasputin's. It was this tension between her and the Krulovian public that led her to unleashing a flood upon a crowd of protesters, and killing hundreds in the process. In 1905, a similar event transpired in Russia, when a crowd of protesters looking to petition Tsar Nicholas II was fired upon by the Imperial Guard, lighting a fuse that would go on to inspire the Russian Revolution of 1905. Later, the monarchy would be abolished and the Tsars executed in the Russian Revolution of 1917, shortly following Grigori Rasputin's assassination. Psychonauts 2 flips the script on what I'd said in my first video. Raz is still Raz, but Rasputin's story is now an even bigger influence over the game's backdrop through the story of Maligula. But Maligula also connects to our boy Raz in two major ways, with two major reveals. Firstly, Maligula is his grandmother.
Nona? Guilty! What are you doing here?
And secondly, the curse isn't real. Before she was Maligula, she was Lucretia Mux of the Psychic Seven, a team of legendary Psychonauts. Only two of them remain with the agency now. Now, the Seven have become more the stuff of stories than anything else. Comics and collectibles and inspiring historical exhibits calling them heroes. When Maligula snapped at the Battle of Krulovia, it was her own closest 6 friends who stopped her, who sealed her dark persona away, leaving her as the lovable Nana Aquato we know today.
Away from the river, Booty!
The curse, it turns out, is a trauma response, something that was fabricated in her head as a coping mechanism after flooding Krulovia and inadvertently killing her own family. Among her victims was her sister Marona Aquato, whose identity she appropriated and whose memory she repressed. Biologically, Nona is Raz's great aunt, not his grandmother. The Psychic Six implanted this aquaphobia into her to keep her from remembering who she was, keep her from triggering her hydrokinetic abilities again. They implanted the fear into her family to keep them from learning the truth too.
So I used the astrolabe to give her an unnatural fear of water. She passed it on to your father, and he passed it on to you.
If the original Psychonauts focused on personal mental health issues and illnesses, Psychonauts 2 brings the spotlight to mental health struggles that are inherited, intergenerational, passed down through the stories we tell. It's about how fact can become warped by the fictions we tell ourselves.
So, there is no curse?
Rasputin, there's no such thing as magical curses. Please, this is science.
In fact, Psychonauts 2 untangles the messy threads that wrap in loops around fact and fiction time and again. For much of the game, you explore Psychonauts HQ and the area around it, while also learning about the Psychic Six. Because history and the stories, it turns out, leave out the seventh. Just as Lucretia represses the side of her that once became Maligula, and just as she's taught her family to repress a fear of drowning by rationalizing it as a curse, history has repressed her place in it too. At some point, 7 became 6. Grigori Rasputin's story frequently straddled the line between fact and fiction too. He's been portrayed in so many ways by popular culture at this point. To quote the famous Boney M song, "Rah rah Rasputin, Russia's greatest love machine." It was a shame how he carried on. In a meta sense, the reveal that the curse was a myth also echoes the mythical nature of Rasputin's death. Did he actually die by drowning? Or was his story made larger than life so we would be impressed? So we would be afraid? Eventually, parts of the aforementioned Bloody Sunday Massacre and the subsequent Russian revolutions are adapted, and changed for the fiction, of course, for Psychonauts 2. One of the final levels in the game takes place in the mental world of a new character, a rich, funny man-child named Crystal Malik, who has this It's a Small World style dark ride built to his vision for restoring Krulovia. Nationalist propaganda has never been more fun, but there's more to his character than just the gag. His family was exiled and suffered heavily after the fall of Krulovia. The game takes care to pause and discursively loop around Malik's real pain. See, Maligula doesn't end up being the main aggressor of Psychonauts 2. That credit goes to Malik, who we learn was the late Tsar's son, whom she once helped. The Alexei parallel in this analog. Malik is a nationalist who's infiltrated the Psychonauts, determined to use their resources to reawaken the woman who once served his father. With Maligula's help and Maligula's powers, he thinks, he can restore Krulovia to its proper glory. He's the game's twist villain, and while he may not be related to Raz, plays just as much of a key role in the game's interplay with real history as Maligula and Raz himself do. Grigori Rasputin and Alexei were close. The game smartly leverages that here to introduce Malik as a foil to our own Raz. Someone who, in their childhood, was close to Nona in her previous life, who tempts her towards that past life. All of Psychonauts 2's mindscapes have to do with repressed fears and memories, or intergenerational trauma, and in all of them, we also see the coping mechanisms different characters use to deal with them. Often, these mechanisms are artistic practices. Writing, cooking, music, knitting. Ways of telling stories and expressing yourself in the ways you want to, instead of letting yourself be defined by your traumas. Some of the mindscapes of the original game, namely Black Velvetopia and Gloria's Theater, showed similar coping strategies through Art 2. Here, though, that's the central focus in almost all of them, letting the levels become even more expressionistic than they were before. The game makes more complex what the first game had already handled with remarkable complexity, by now adding the layer that we aren't just our own struggles. Often, we carry the struggles of our parents and grandparents and close friends, just readapted to suit our own minds. Not just genetically, but mimetically. A particularly standout level follows Bob Zanotto's struggles with alcoholism, first seeing his mother succumb to the bottle, growing up having to take care of the household while just a kid, and eventually struggling with drink himself after losing his husband in the fight against Maligula. Raz spends an entire level here sailing around on water and platforming through swamps. He recognizes that Bob needs this, needs him. It makes the level feel especially layered and significant, not just for Bob, but Raz himself too. How far he's come. True to the promise of the premise, the final boss fight with Maligula heavily features water as the major hazard again too. Here, it's not just Raz who confronts his fear, it's his whole family. The Aquatos look their phobias in the face and tackle it head on, because it's the only way to save Nana. And saving her doesn't just mean exorcising the evil part of her, as the Psychic 7 did. It means helping her make peace with it, helping her finally accept her mistakes and move forward in spite of them.
Stay away from the water, Pooty!
You heard the Lady Rasputin. Let's get you away from that water.
See, curses are fictional. In fiction, a curse is a thing that can magically be cured. In real life, though, a phobia is something real that can't just be waved away. The knowledge that the Aquato curse isn't real does not, yet anyway, cure Raz's aquaphobia by the game's end. It does change it, though. No longer does his psyche try to swat him into the water. Now, it catches him to save him from drowning. He's made a big step. Approach his dad in the post-game, and you'll be treated to a lovely moment between father and son, as they reflect on the years they've internalized as a family to, quote, stay away from the water. Now, his dad is excited by the prospect of doing water tricks at the circus again, and maybe even going for a swim. Psychonauts 2 is a game about irrational traumas and fears and compulsions, and how we try to rationalize them regardless, through the stories we tell ourselves in our own minds. The game loosely references real historical events to show that history, both public and personal, is subjective, and that subjectivity can be a source of hubris, of despair, of fear. It can freeze us in place, leaving us unable to move forward. Critically, though, the game establishes very early on that these beliefs can't be dispelled with an easy psychic session or two. A Psychonaut's job is not to, quote-unquote, fix people. It's to help them understand themselves, so they can identify the appropriate language and tools to help themselves. In 2019, researchers at the NBN Singhad School of Engineering in India proposed that exposing people with aquaphobia to simulated water in VR could potentially be a useful way of treating their fear. In 2022, scientists from the University of Quebec, Montreal published an exploratory study examining if the use of 360-degree video with a head-mounted headset could be useful in that regard too. They found that their 2 participants, both students aged 11 to 12 with a deep fear of water, did in fact feel immersed in the experience, and would look around for landmarks and feel both anxious and curious about exploring. That anxiety would heighten as the simulation transitioned them to greater depths. In 2024, researchers at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, placed 12 participants in flotation tanks as a way of letting them safely be in water while exploring different underwater worlds in VR. Virtual reality is often used as a way of treating phobias, and while playing Psychonauts is obviously not going to be treatment in any way, shape, or form, there is one other game in the series outside of the mainline numbered titles. In the VR game Psychonauts in the Rhombus of Ruin, Raz and his colleagues go underwater to the, well, Rhombus of Ruin, clearly inspired by the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, we flew into the deadly parallelogram?
Rasputin, please! Parallelogram sides are not necessarily equal.
Unlike the mainline games, here you don't platform around as Raz, but instead use his clairvoyance ability to jump between other characters' perspectives, seeing through their eyes. Interestingly enough, seeing through the eyes of fish or other underwater characters actually helps Raz feel okay with his fear, even as the bulk of the game takes place underwater.
So this is what it's like to be underwater. Hey, the door's closing. I'm stuck out here. Oh, that's right. I'm not really out here. I'm usually terrified of water, but since I'm only doing it mentally, I can actually enjoy it for once.
Although the efficacy of using VR to treat aquaphobia remains in question, and studies are still ongoing, it is cool that a VR game shows that Raz becomes more comfortable with exploring water so long as he's doing it virtually and vicariously, so long as his body is on solid ground. Released in 2017, the game also foreshadowed Psychonauts 2's big reveal about his phobia ahead of time. I include Rhombus of Ruin in this video to make sure I address what it says about Raz's psyche around water, but also to highlight that there are therapeutic paths forward when it comes to phobias. To reiterate, that doesn't necessarily mean VR, but VR is just one compelling and relevant example for our purposes. I once called the original Psychonauts' clever lampshade over swimming tropes and games the Aquato solution. But by Psychonauts 2, it doesn't feel like a lampshade anymore. It doesn't feel like a solution either. Swimming feels a bit more common in today's games, decades later. Developers are finding ways to make it fun and rewarding. In Psychonauts 2, the decision to retain Raz's inability to swim is instead emotionally rewarding. It feels emotionally real. An arc that isn't fully complete so much as it is fully complicated, as so many of our ongoing issues in real life are. This is the Aquato complication. I don't mean complication in a negative way. I mean it in the sense that it introduces complexity, a way for us to believe that things can get better. It doesn't mean they will, but they can, and sometimes that's enough. Rasputin, Grulovia's new psychic marine. He's doing his best to carry on.